We're here today talking to Brad Rosen, the co-founder and chief operating officer of Nodar. Good morning, Brad.
Morning, Mike. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. How are you?
Good.
Phantom braking has been in the news a lot in the last 2 weeks, primarily and first with an investigation of Tesla by the NHTSA, and just recently concerning a lawsuit filed against Nissan. Two different vehicles or vehicle companies, two different systems of advanced automatic emergency braking, or as Nissan calls it in their case, forward emergency braking.
Yeah.
Nodar'S is in the business of sensors and of sensing for various autonomous driving and ADAS systems. The whole concept of phantom braking is one that I'm sure faces the entire industry in which you operate.
Yeah.
How does Nodar view the phantom braking, and what does your system do to prevent such an occurrence happening?
Sure. Well, I guess first I can describe my system and then what I think is happening or might be happening with phantom braking in general. Nodar'S is a venture-backed company developing 3D vision technology based on cameras. We, like Tesla, believe that cameras can be used for very high reliability sensing, and the output of 3D data surrounding the car, basically, which is critical for driver assistance and for fully autonomous driving. The car must be able to sense its environment with a high degree of accuracy. So what we do is actually, it's an age-old technique that involves using two cameras and comparing a left image to a right image, and triangulating the distance to basically every pixel in the scene. It's similar to if you were to close your eye and then close your other eye, you'd see a shift in the scene. That shift is proportional to each object in the scene. In other words, the shift will be less for an object that's farther away and more for an object that is closer to you. And so it's a geometric calculation, and it's highly reliable. And in fact, Subaru has shipped stereo vision systems since 2016 in the millions of units, and it's highly reliable. It's a great way to measure. What we've done is we've figured out how to separate the cameras, mount them independently, and in doing so, we can extend the range out to, we've taken accurate measurements out to 1,250 meters. So part of this story, we believe, is being able to take an accurate, reliable measurement. And another part of the story is having enough range with the measurement, being able to detect an object far enough away to make a decision. And so Nodar'S is a software company. We sell into the passenger car market as well as the trucking market, and we're looking at some of the ancillary markets as well. We just added Roger Nielsen to our board. Roger ran Daimler Trucks for many years, and so you can imagine. And I think trucking is just a really interesting category as we talk about self-driving, like level 4, but we can talk about that later. So that's what we do. So getting back to phantom braking, my sense, and by the way, these systems are black boxes, right? We don't have the ability to look at the output and follow the algorithm and see exactly why they're making a decision to hit the brakes. But as I understand it, at least with Tesla, in many situations, oncoming cars are being recognized as a threat. And so either the Tesla system is misrecognizing the object, and this is one of the shortcomings of using AI, which Tesla does to assess depth. They say, oh, that's a child at 50 meters, but it could be an adult at 100 meters, right? It's this is one of the shortcomings. It's very difficult to kind of get that contextual information. So it can make a decision on distance, a wrong decision on distance in that sense. Likewise, it could misrecognize a billboard for an actual scene, right? And make a decision based on, a 2D image that is not actually 3D. So these are some of the issues. And another possible issue is that it's not segmenting the road properly in some situations. So it's not saying, oh, this truck is actually in the oncoming lane. It's okay, right? So say you're going around a curve, there's an oncoming truck. It's the Tesla or the Nissan, whatever's pointing right at it, but in fact, it's not in your lane. So it hits the brakes because it thinks it's a threat when in fact, it's made a mistake about the segmentation of the road. You understand?
Mhm.
So that's another, potential issue. And I was reading this morning that many of these complaints on the Tesla, of which there are hundreds now, have to do with oncoming traffic. And another shortcoming of cameras, which we are susceptible to as well, because we use cameras, is glare and low visibility, right? I mean, it's like your human eye. At some point, you can't see if there's not enough photons coming in. If there's glare, sometimes that can be a problem for cameras, although cameras these days have incredible photosensitivity and dynamic range. So it's becoming less of a problem every year. So basically, let's the cases of phantom braking that you've cited are different. Tesla is using a single camera with an AI back end that compares the scene that it sees at all, at 30 frames a second or whatever, to what it's been trained on, because neural networks must be trained on, millions of hours of driving data, which Tesla does. So it compares what it's seen to what it knows in the past, essentially like a human brain might, and it makes decisions. And it's fallible in the sense that if it hasn't seen a situation before, it could make a mistake, or it doesn't have enough resolution. It sees an adult and it's actually a child, right? And so it misrepresents the distance because it doesn't know the height of the person, right? So it's just doing this kind of comparison all the time.
You mentioned a few things I'd like to go into further about your system and camera systems in general. You mentioned some of the challenges of glare and such. What about weather challenges, especially where we both live and operate in the Northeast, between rain, fog, snow? I mean, snow to the point where it actually covers cameras, completely blocking, and road detritus that throws up, be it slush, salt, sand, both in advance to block a camera and then while it's operating. How does your system handle that?
Well, first of all, cameras are susceptible to all of these issues. This is why the industry and we support sensor fusion, because each type of sensor, whether it's radar, vision, LiDAR, they each have their strengths and their shortcomings, okay? And radar is very good and very reliable because it's not susceptible to interference such as that you're describing, right? It's going to give you a reliable measurement of distance, whether it's nighttime, whether there's sludge on the sensor, the radar waves go right through all that stuff. And that's why it's a good sensor. It also has its shortcomings. It's not very high resolution. You can't say, oh, that's a person and that's a car. And that's, it can, have trouble with vertical resolution, like is that bridge in front of the car or above the car? Like there are issues with radar, and this is why, again, the industry likes sensor fusion. In the case of our system, which is binocular or stereo vision, we have two super high resolution cameras, right? So you can imagine, even when you're driving a motorcycle and your shield on your helmet gets water on it, you can still see pretty well. It has to be very significantly blocked for your visibility to go down to the point where you can't drive the motorcycle. The same is true for cameras, right? So there's like flakes of snow and whatever, but we're focusing farther down the road. And there have been, Daimler did some studies, but there have been studies showing that stereo vision performs better than monocular sensors and LiDAR in the face of obstructed sort of bad weather visibility, okay? so, we don't have any, well, I will say, we do have a little bit of magic sauce when it comes to this stuff. We output with every measure of depth, a level of confidence, right? So for every pixel, right now we're doing 5 megapixels per camera in real time, and which is a lot. It's, say it's at 10 frames a second, 5 megapixels at 10 frames a second is a heap of data. We output a confidence map for every pixel. So we'll say, like, if there's glare at the top of the view, we'll report, hey, we're not that confident in these pixels, this grouping of pixels. And that's a good moment for the system to fail over and say, hey, Mr. Radar, what are you seeing there? Or Mrs. LiDAR, like, what are you seeing there? So we think this idea of reporting confidence is super important to kind of having an overall higher level of confidence in each measurement, right? So
your system, the Nodar'S system, is intended to work in conjunction with other sensors in the vehicle?
We assume and support the fusion of other sensors. I think it depends upon the use case. Okay. So, and this is part of your initial question, is level 2+, level 3, and level 4, are they all the same? No, they're really not, right? In the case of level 2+ and level 3, these are ADAS use cases where the driver is expected to pay attention at least some of the time. In level 2+, it's pretty much all the time. You always have to be touching the wheel and looking at the road, basically. Level 3 has some amount of self-driving where the car is in control, right? And so we believe that Nodar, in conjunction with a radar, for instance, can support level 2, 2+, and 3 without the use of a LiDAR, because we're taking an ultra reliable measurement. There's a radar to fail back to. We have super high resolution, and we can see out hundreds of meters, and we do it in real time. So in level 4, it's a different discussion, right? You were talking earlier about robotaxis. Trucking falls into level 4. We believe that trucking is going to be the first to hit the road, sort of unmanned or self-driving, fully self-driving. And in that situation, we expect the camera-based system to be dominant, and we expect there to be LiDARs, more than one, and radars around the truck. And the cameras will face forward, they'll face rearward, and they'll face sideways to ensure there are no collisions.
So you'll have true 3D coverage by camera.
Yeah.
To get it right.
Absolutely. With LiDAR as backup.
So I gather the challenges will be not just, if we're talking class 8 with tractor trailers, it's going to be both the tractor and the trailer has to be involved to make that work.
Yeah, I mean, we anticipate that all the sensors will most of the sensors will probably be on the cab, because it's very expensive to outfit a trailer with cameras, and the trailers are kind of dime a dozen, mix and match. So, on the mirrors, along the top of the trailer, in the grill, the bumper, this is where the sensors will be located.
In looking at your website, again, layman, non-engineer, you've got a diagram, and I'm looking at it now, that shows how does Nodar compare, and then you've got a very simple graphic of a vehicle, of a car, and a cone of light, it looks like. First, a mono camera at 50 meters, automotive LiDAR 200 meters, and Nodar at 1,000 meters, as you discussed. My question is, what it shows, and it may just be that this particular graphic, it shows it straight ahead with not a very broad beam of coverage. Is that a camera issue or just the graphic I'm looking at? That's really
just the graphic. But I will say, our go-to-market is to handle the forward-looking case and the rearward-looking case first. Okay, and you mentioned the cone. I mean, these are all configuration options. Our algorithms don't care, right? Okay. The only thing we care about is that there's an overlapping field of view between the cameras. So the cameras can't be independently pointed in different directions. There has to be some overlap, and it's the overlapping region where we get depth information and we can paint the 3D picture.
Speaking of cameras, you said you're a software company, not a hardware company.
Yeah.
I take it the quality and the resolution capability of the camera is quite important for your system to work properly.
Yeah, again, it depends on the use case. For instance, if we're talking about a delivery robot, say it's FedEx's or Neo's delivery robot, where it's going much slower, we can or a situation where we need much faster, response time, like higher frames per second. We can work with lower quality cameras. We could work with a 1 megapixel camera. We could work with higher quality cameras, 12 megapixels, and we have done. And there are lots of ways in which to configure this, like region of interest, like focusing in on a particular area to improve speed, these types of things. So we're open is what I'm trying to say. We use automotive grade standard cameras, and we have this $1.7 million project with the Army. It's an SBIR where we're developing technology using infrared cameras. So again, we don't really care about the cameras. Infrared is very cool because obviously it works very well at night and in high dust situations, for instance.
I imagine the military is a very big market for self-driving, for totally autonomous vehicles.
You are correct. And
I mean, in many ways, I feel they're going to push the envelope faster, further than any other.
Yeah, and they have been for many, many years, probably
Right.
much longer than we realize.
Because there it's a matter of life and death.
Yeah, yeah. So we've got unmanned drones and tanks, and I think other countries do as well. And this type of technology really comes to bear in these applications.
You talked about fusion, sensor fusion, as a key part of making it work, especially as you go up the self-driving groupings. That means to me, it sounds to me like you have to work in conjunction with the manufacturer, the OEM, as well as other tier 1 and 2 and 3 suppliers that are supplying those other systems or other sensors and systems.
Yeah, it depends on the category, it turns out. So for passenger vehicles, as you know, there's a known value chain, right? And so, yes, we work with the manufacturers, the OEMs, we show them how we're different and why this is a very disruptive technology and approach. And in unison, we work with the tier 1 suppliers to also offer them differentiation, right? A new technology that's disruptive and a differentiated approach to the market. Then in general, the OEMs typically will say, hey, we want to design this in, and they'll go to the tier 1s, and we'll work with the tier 1s to productize for volume this technology in conjunction with their ADAS systems, which will include radar, may include LiDAR and higher levels of software. So yes, it's an integrated system. But if you look at like the AV companies, the robo-taxi companies, and the trucking companies, a lot of these folks are vertically integrated. So what I mean by that is, let's say Aurora, Kodiak, Torque, these companies are all building a full stack on their own. And yeah, they'll buy hardware from a manufacturer, whether it's Paccar or it's Daimler, and integrate their stack onto that. But it's not totally clear how they'll source technology. We may end up selling directly to those companies, is my point. Same with the robotaxi companies like Cruise. I think they're doing full stack type of development.
2 quick last questions. I'm going to give you a softball in terms of Hammerhead. Tell us about Hammerhead.
Oh man, thank you so much. Well, as I was saying, what we've done that's unique is we created software that allows us to mount the cameras independently, right? And the wider the camera, the longer the range. The wider the stance of the cameras, the longer the range. So we were looking around and we found that the hammerhead shark has the widest distance between their pupils of any animal in the animal kingdom. And recent research has shown that their eyes have an overlapping region which gives them the best depth perception of any animal. And we assume, use that because in a featureless ocean, they need exquisite depth perception to actually be able to catch fish. So that is why we chose the hammerhead shark as our icon.
Okay. You're obviously very involved in all the advances and the progress within the entire ADAS and autonomous vehicle world. How soon do you expect for us to see truly driverless vehicles on the road? And you've mentioned you think commercial vehicles will be where those first start.
Yeah, our opinion is, number one, this is incredibly complex stuff. Much more so than I think anybody, back when this groundswell of autonomy started, maybe, I don't know, 2014 or whatever, but people thought, LiDAR would be a magic bullet and we'd get to autonomy by whatever, 2020. We've learned that it's really, really complicated as human drivers. There's so many edge cases we deal with every day, traffic lights that are complicated, people cutting in. There's just so much complexity. So our general opinion, and mine included, is that it's going to take, to get to mainstream autonomy where a consumer could buy a car that drives itself without the consumer having to worry at all, decades, literally decades, maybe 2 decades for that particular use case. That would be level 5, what I just described. That said, what my opinion is that we'll take baby steps, increasing what we call the ODD or the design domain, right? Like in Germany now, you can buy a Mercedes that will drive itself on some highways on the Autobahn at some speed, in great weather, right? So that's what I mean. We'll take baby steps. And also Honda has a level 3 vehicle that on the highway at a very low speed, you can read a book. Okay. And I think that, this is going to edge forward at the same time. And taking the same notion of constraining the design domain, we'll see trucking, right? Trucking, the ROI is really there. It costs about $1.67 a mile to run a truck right now. There's a shortage of drivers, a massive shortage of drivers. The sooner we can get automated trucks on the road, run them 20 hours a day, reduce the cost per mile to 60 cents because the bulk of that is the driver. Increase safety because drivers no longer have to get drowsy. It's like a complete win. And so that's why we think that trucking will be the first to really, in a mainstream way, have autonomous driving. Yeah.
Where's Nodar going? What is your short, medium, long-term
Yeah,
plans
great.
for Nodar?
Just bringing it back to the phantom braking thing, we think that being able to create a reliable map of the 3D environment around the car is critical. Our technology does that, and it does it, out to exquisite ranges. And like I said, 1,250 meters in some situations. So we think that that's a starting point to start to get to the levels of safety that will be required for the regulatory environment and for consumers to embrace this technology. So we think we're a cornerstone component actually of this. And as you look out, let's just look at the next decade. There's going to be something like 250 million L2 plus and above cars produced. That's a big number. We hope to be on every one of them. We think that we're literally a critical component that enables long-range small object detection, unconstrained, in a reliable way in most situations. So we hope to be on literally every one of those vehicles. Moving forward, we think that will be a critical component of L4 trucking and robotaxis. So that's where we're going.
Okay, then the question is, are you on any yet?
In production, no. But we are working with all of the players you'd expect in the passenger car space and in the trucking space and in the robotaxi space. And we've engaged in more than 10 sort of proof of concepts. We have some integration projects going on. So we're we're inching closer. You know, the timeline to get new technology onto the road in passenger vehicles like 6 years.
Yeah.
In trucking, we think it's going to be more like 3 to 4.
Really?
So we're well down the path.
Excellent. Well, thank
Yeah.
you, Brad. Much appreciate your insight and information.
Thanks,
And I'm
Mike.
sure we'll be talking to you in the future as Nodar develops more and just as this entire technology moves ahead.
Great. Happy to speak with you anytime.